Hey, hello there. Today's Leetcode challenge question is called validate IP address. We need to write a function to check whether an input string is a valid IPv4 or v6 address or neither. So the bulk of the text here is basically the question definition about valid IPv4 or v6 address. So for v4, it's a dot separated decimal numbers. The numbers, so we have 3 dot and 4 numbers. The numbers go from 0 to 255. And the leading zeros in IPv4 is totally invalid. So 0, 1 is invalid. IPv6, it's column separated hexadecimal numbers. So it's 7 columns and 8 numbers. So the numbers, I guess, go from 0000 to FFFF. Also that we can omit some leading zeros among the hexadecimal digits. So that's an option. It means that we could potentially have leading zeros as long as it does not go beyond 4 digits in each group. So that's the difference between the leading zeros between IPv4 and v6 here. Also that lowercase, uppercase in this question, we don't care. We don't replace consecutive group of 0 values with a single empty group using 2 consecutive columns. I guess this is the real IPv4 validity. You can allow this, but for this question's purpose, every group has to have at least some digits in it. So it's easier for us to code. So the only leading zero that's not allowed in IPv6 is it's the one that's putting this group longer than 4. So that's the leading zero that's not allowed. But as long as the digits inside each group is at the most 4, with leading zero, it should be fine. So that's the quite important difference between IPv4 and v6 for this question's definition about validity. So we can assume there's no extra space, no special characters. So the input is relatively clean. All we need to do is to do we see 3 dots? If we see 3 dots, we throw the IP address into the IPv4 validity test. If we see 7 columns, we throw the IP address into the IPv6 validity test. Yeah, this question definitely is about the cleanness of the code, whether the code is readable, maintainable. So we think about separating those testing into different little piece of functions and piece them together so that the code is readable and maintainable. That's really it. There is no data structure, no algorithm whatsoever involved in this, and it's definitely not a testing for the regular expression. So we just code the string and string testing, basic logics, and yeah, and that's pretty much it. It's totally about the cleanness of the code, I think. Yeah, so what we're gonna do is to if the string has 3 dots, we're going to throw this into the valid IPv4 test. If the IP contains 7 columns, we throw that into the IPv6 test. Otherwise, we return it's neither. Yeah, so let's define those two. So for IPv4, we're basically just gonna look over all the 4 groups of numbers and see use the definition about validity to test those individually. So for number in split by this dot, if this number is not a valid, the IPv4 number, you could just return neither. Otherwise, I would just return that's IPv4. So now what we need to do is just code this function. If it's empty, return false. If this number is not contain stuff that's other than the 0 to 9 digits. If there is a leading 0 in this number, and in the end, we'll just test whether the number is actually in range of 0 to 55. So we'll have this ready for the check. Yeah, so that's the IPv4 test. We first test whether this string contains 3 dots. If it contains 3 dots, we try to break that into 4 different number sections. For each section, we test whether that section is a valid IPv4 number. So for each number, it has to be not empty. It has to only use 0 to 9. If it has length of 2 or more, we wouldn't allow it to have a leading 0. Otherwise, we'll just see that if it's within the range. So that's for IPv4 test. Similarly, we'll code up for IPv6. So this is testing whether it's a hex digits. And we're just going to test whether this number has a length that's less than or equal to 4 in the end. So that's the range test. Also, it takes care of the leading 0. So that's pretty much it. Let's see. Yeah, it's working. So that's pretty much the code. Try to break this into subroutines for testing IPv6 and v4 individually, and try to use a function to test the number group. So yeah, the cleanness of the code is readability, maintainable. It's definitely the key in this question. There is no algorithm or data structure whatsoever. Yeah, that's the question today.